I hope you enjoy this hero's journey into the realm of philosophy, psychology, and physics. If you want to help me create more content like this, please subscribe and consider sponsoring me here on YouTube. I also want to thank the Platonic Mystery School of the Divine Infinite Being for sponsoring this course, and you can check that school out at divineinfinitebeing.com. Nachiketa's near-death experience of Vishnu as cosmic horizon. So here's the Katha Upanishad. And the story is, a Brahmin boy named Nachiketas is cursed to die accidentally by his father during a fire sacrifice. He meets Yamaraj, the king of death, who teaches him that the body is like a chariot, in which the self, or Atman, is a passenger. So there was a fire sacrifice going on, and Nachiketas, a Brahmin boy, his father was trying to pull a fast one over on the Brahmins who he hired to chant the Vedic mantras over the fire while he performed the sacrifice. He was going to give the Brahmins his sick old cows as payment, which would have been a liability for them to take care of these cows who could no longer produce milk. So Nachiketas thought, my father will be cursed to go to hell if he goes through with this. Maybe at least if he can give the Brahmins me, his own son, I can save him from this horrible karma. So during the fire sacrifice, he said to his father, who will you give me to? Who will you give me to, father? He kept saying this. And eventually his father got so exasperated, he said, to death. In other words, I'll kill you. You know, I think of the cartoon The Simpsons, where Homer Simpson, the father's choking his son, Bart Simpson, because Bart is pestering him. So his father turns at him and says, I'll give you to death. The next thing you read in the Upanishad is Nachiketas down in the underworld, waiting in the house of the king of death, Yamaraj, who's absent for 3 days. So I guess if you say something in front of the fire sacrifice, you have to keep your word. I know that is an issue with Arjuna and his brothers, and they have to share a wife because of a similar incident. But at any rate, once Nachiketas is down waiting for Yamaraj, Yamaraj's servant tells him, you know, there's a Brahmin boy who's been waiting without food or water at your house for 3 days. And then Yamaraj panics, because to mistreat a Brahmin like that leads to horrible karma. So he rushes home and he apologizes for the delay, and he says, I'll give you 3 wishes to compensate for this rude behavior of mine. So one of the wishes that Nachiketas asks about, which confuses me, is what happens after you die. It confuses me because he's speaking to death personified. But at any rate, Yamaraj says, oh, don't ask that. That one's too tough. Why don't you take all of these beautiful women riding these fine celestial chariots that only the demigods have access to? He tempted him with all these worldly treasures. Nachiketas refused. Then Yamaraj said, good, you passed the test. You are worthy to hear the truth about the soul. So with that in mind, I'll just read here. The man who has a discriminative intellect for the driver and a controlled mind for the reins reaches the end of the journey, the highest place of Vishnu, the all-pervading and unchangeable one. So this is Yamaraj talking to the Brahmin boy Nachiketas. He's comparing the soul to a passenger in a chariot. The horses are the senses. The mind is the reins of the chariot. The intelligence is the charioteer. Continuing with Yamaraj's instruction, he says, beyond the senses are the objects. Beyond the objects is the mind. Beyond the mind is the intellect. Beyond the intellect is the great Atman. Beyond the great Atman is the unmanifested. Beyond the unmanifested is the Purusha, the cosmic soul. Beyond the Purusha there is nothing. That is the end. That is the final goal. So the senses and their objects. So we saw that the 8 concentric spheres of each material universe correspond to the 8 fundamental elements: earth, water, fire, air, ether, then mind, intelligence, and false ego. Each of those elements corresponds to a sense perception. Earth corresponds to the sense of smell. Water corresponds to taste. So each of these elements is in a concentric spherical organization. And when you die, your soul rises through these spheres of the cosmos. And that's what we see here. Beyond the senses are the objects. Beyond the objects is the mind. So after the sense objects, which are the fundamental elements, after you go through those 5 through ether, then you reach mind. So in this model, there's the 8 concentric spheres, because after ether you have mind, intelligence, and false ego. Beyond the objects is the mind. Beyond the mind is the intellect. Beyond the intellect is the great Atman. So the outermost sphere, which is in the Srimad Bhagavatam and the Bhagavad Gita, called the false ego, So beyond the false ego element at its outermost edge, that would be corresponding to the horizon of the cosmos described by string theory. That is where the past, the present, and the future are interwoven. We read in the previous Upanishad, the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. Akshara was the name given to that great soul, and that Akshara is where the past, the present, and the future are interwoven with the outermost sphere of the cosmos. So beyond the great Atman, beyond the edge of the universe, is the unmanifested. That's Brahman, the ocean of Brahman. Or, because the universes are floating in the causal ocean, that's that coagulated portion of the unmanifest ocean of pure potential Brahman. I would assume here correspond to the same thing. The universal bubbles are floating in the causal ocean, which is portion of the ocean of Brahman. Beyond the unmanifested is the Purusha. So we saw the three Purusha avatars. Mahavishnu exhales and inhales all of the bubble universes from the pores of his skin. Then Garbhodakashayi Vishnu lays down in the ocean in the middle of every bubble universe. And then Kshirodakashayi Vishnu, or Paramatma, exists in the center of every material and spiritual atom in each bubble universe. So which of the Purusha avatars is being referred to here? Well, beyond the unmanifested, that's the causal ocean in which the universes are floating, is the Purusha. I assume that would be Mahavishnu, sleeping and dreaming as he exhales and inhales the multiverse of bubble universes. Beyond the Purusha, there is nothing. That is the end. That is the final goal. So Vishnu is the final goal. So let me just read this one more time, because this is so crucial to compare to holographic string theory. Beginning with this quote again from the Katha Upanishad, the man who has a discriminative intellect for the driver. So the driver in the Bhagavad Gita is Krishna himself. He's literally driving the chariot for Arjuna and giving Arjuna instructions about how to live his life, specifically by fighting in the war which he was reluctant to fight in. So the man who has a discriminative intellect for the driver and a controlled mind for the reins reaches the end of the journey, the highest place of Vishnu, the all-pervading and unchangeable one. So the ultimate goal is Vishnu, and you can ride the chariot upon which your soul is a passenger back to Vishnu if you have a good intellect and a controlled mind that keeps the sense desires under control. And then he goes step by step how you get there. Beyond the senses are the objects. That's the five elements: earth, water, fire, air, and ether. Beyond the objects is the mind. That's the mind element surrounding the ether sphere. Beyond the mind is the intellect. Beyond the intellect is the great Atman, which I'm corresponding with the outermost edge, the outermost sphere of each bubble universe. Beyond the great Atman is the unmanifested, which is the causal ocean, which is a portion of the ocean of Brahman. Beyond the unmanifested is the Purusha, the cosmic soul. I'm equating that with Mahavishnu. Beyond the Purusha, there's nothing. That is the end. That is the final goal. Krishna's universal form. Hundreds of thousands of suns at once. So here's another description in the Bhagavad Gita of what I interpret as the cosmic horizon, Krishna's universal form, which contains the past, the present, and the future of the entire universe. So here is what Arjuna is saying to Krishna. Arjuna asks Krishna, I've heard of this universal form. Could you please show me that? Krishna does show him the universal form, and that vision is what finally convinces Arjuna to fight in the battle, mainly because he sees, well, the past, the present, and the future are already fixed. All of these soldiers have already been devoured by your flaming mouths, as all of the planets and every other thing in the universe ultimately will be. So for me to kill these temporary bodies of these soldiers on this battlefield, considering it's already a done deed, I better just get on with it. So here is what Arjuna says to Krishna. If you think that I am able to behold your cosmic form, O my Lord, O Master of all mystic power, then kindly show me that universal self. Whatever you wish to see, says Krishna, can be seen all at once in this body. This universal form can show you all that you now desire, as well as whatever you may desire in the future. Everything is here completely. If hundreds of thousands of suns rose up at once into the sky, they might resemble the effulgence of the Supreme Person in that universal form. At that time Arjuna could see in the universal form of the Lord the unlimited expansions of the universe situated in one place, although divided into many, many thousands. So hundreds of thousands of suns at once, he sees the universal form in which the past, the present, and the future of the entire universe are concentrated in one place, which reminds me of holographic string theory and the fact that the gravitational singularity exists at each point of the encompassing sphere, which is infinitely hot and upon which the past, the present, and the future are interwoven at each point as if on a holographic film. Krishna as cosmic horizon, you are spread throughout the sky, says Arjuna to Krishna. You are the supreme primal objective. You are the best in all the universes. You are inexhaustible, and you are the oldest. You are the maintainer of religion, the eternal personality of Godhead. You are the origin without beginning, middle, or end. You have numberless arms, and the sun and moon are among your great unlimited eyes. By your own radiance, you are heating this entire universe. Although you are one, you are spread throughout the sky and the planets and all space between. O Great One, as I behold this terrible form, I see that all the planetary systems are perplexed. All the demigods are surrendering and entering into you. They are very much afraid, and with folded hands they are singing the Vedic hymns. So again, Krishna resembles very much the gravitational singularity, which is radiating outward and creating the entire universe, and radiating back in from the outermost sphere. Within that one infinitesimally small point, all of space and time, every bit of information describing the entire historical trajectory from the beginning, the middle to the end of the entire universe, not only this universe, but all the universes in the multiverse, and all of the Vaikuntha Loka planets in the spiritual sky. Every single thing is contained in this one point, which Krishna claims to be. Krishna as cosmic horizon, time I am, destroyer of worlds. Again, Krishna is speaking to Arjuna. Now, before I get into this, notice I have a picture of Robert Oppenheimer and then a picture of the atomic blast. This is the verse from the Bhagavad Gita that Oppenheimer was thinking of in his head when he saw that first atomic test explosion, although he interpreted it as, now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds. He read it, the original Sanskrit. That's how he interpreted the words interview on NBC 20 years after the fact. It's just an important historical fact that at the dawn of the atomic age, in which the entire history of the earth could end in atomic ashes, began with a quote from Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, which we will go over now. O Vishnu, I see you devouring all people in your flaming mouths and covering the universe with your immeasurable rays. Scorching the worlds, you are manifest. O Lord of Lords, so fierce a form, please tell me who you are. I offer my obeisances unto you. Please be gracious to me. I do not know what your mission is, and I desire to hear of it. The blessed Lord said, time I am, destroyer of worlds, and I have come to engage all people. With the exception of you, meaning the Pandavas, all the soldiers here on both sides will be slain. Therefore, get up and prepare to fight. So this class, Immortality and the Unreality of Death, a hero's journey through philosophy, psychology, and physics. To be a hero performing for God on the cosmic stage, that is what satisfies a human being and nothing less than that, says Ernest Becker after analyzing and distilling 20th century psychology. We saw that agrees with Plato in the Symposium, the dialogue in which Socrates recalls the lessons he learned from the priestess Diotima. So here, Krishna is telling Arjuna, put away your philosophical weakness and your soft heart, which doesn't really understand the actual situation of the universe and the position of the soul there within. Get up and prepare to fight. Arjuna is now willing to do that because he's seen Krishna's universal form. He's seen how Krishna, although a flute-playing cowherd boy on the one hand, is also the all-devouring essence of the universe, from which everything emerges and back into which everything is annihilated. Krishna in his original form, undivided devotional service. When Arjuna thus saw Krishna in his original form, he said, seeing this human-like form, so very beautiful, my mind is now pacified, and I am restored to my original nature. So after seeing the horrible universal form, Arjuna begged Krishna to let him see him in his two-armed form as Krishna again. The blessed Lord said, my dear Arjuna, the form which you are now seeing is very difficult to behold. Even the demigods are ever seeking the opportunities to see this form which is so dear. He says, behold, this form which is so dear. That seems a little vain. Notice he's wearing a peacock feather in his helmet, and he always wears a peacock feather. The peacock is the archetype of vanity. Krishna is not ashamed of being beautiful. It's a well-known fact in Goloka Vrindavan, according to the religious scriptures that describe his own home planet, that everyone spends their days admiring what a beautiful cowherd boy he is. So I think that's just, to me, a slightly comical character trait of this God archetype as presented by the Gaudiya Vaishnavas and the Vaishnavas generally. A beautiful cowherd boy who talks about himself as having this dearmost form, which even the demigods aspire to perceive. My dear Arjuna, only by undivided devotional service can I be understood as I am, standing before you, and can thus be seen directly. Only in this way can you enter into the mysteries of my understanding. So that's the crux of the message here. Only by undivided devotional service can I be understood as I am. This is what I'm trying to help people take a leap of faith in this class. To surrender your conscious ego to the supreme archetypal self on the understanding that each of us is a manifestation of that supreme self, which I am equating with the omnicentric gravitational singularity. That a human life is only perfected when we realize our position in this universe as parts and parcels of the omnicentric singularity, and when we realize that that singularity is encompassed by this cosmic sphere, at every point of which God exists, so that the past, the present, and the future are conserved at each point of the horizon of the cosmos. This holographic string theory model that was derived from the mathematics of a fusion of general relativity and quantum mechanics, that entire historical trend of mathematical physics can be traced back to Plato and really to Pythagoras, and it has returned us full circle to, as we will see, Platonic cosmology, which greatly resembles the Vedic cosmology we're looking at here. So we're trying to discover what kind of a collective immortality ideology we can all collectively believe in based on the psyche equals singularity equation, and here is an excellent example from the past. Radha Krishna Goloka Vrindavan. This slide is about Krishna's home planet, Goloka, or more specifically Goloka Vrindavan. The cowherd village in which Krishna lives eternally is Vrindavan. The V is pronounced like a light B sound, cross between a B and a V. Before I read here from the Brahma Samhita, I just want to compare Goloka Vrindavan to Plato's idea of the good. According to Plato's theory, all of the material forms we experience in this temporary world where things come into existence and then fade out, each particular form we can see, smell, touch, taste, or hear is a shadowy projection, like a dream, of some eternal form in the spiritual world, some perfect archetypal form. So the trees that you experience here all radiate from one absolute perfect idea of tree. And all of these absolute perfect ideas are contained in the idea of the good, which he describes at the end of the cave allegory as the infinitely bright source of light in the material world and the source of consciousness in the spiritual world. Goloka Vrindavan is the source of all of the other spiritual planets, which are themselves the source of the Brahma Jyoti, or the ocean of Brahman, the ocean of spiritual light, a portion of which coagulates into the causal ocean. Mahavishnu lays down and goes to sleep on the causal ocean, and as he dreams he exhales all of the bubble universes in the multiverse, and then inhales them after this enormous span of time. 310 trillion Earth years, I believe, was the number. One big difference between Plato's idea of the good and Goloka Vrindavan is that there's not just one perfect archetypal form of everything. There's innumerable types of trees and birds, but all of them are made of eternal knowledge and bliss. Sat, Chit, Ananda, Vigraha. Sat is eternal, Chit is knowledge, Ananda is bliss, Vigraha is form. All of the spiritual forms, which are the archetypal forms of which the material forms are dream projections, are made of absolute eternal knowledge and bliss. Each one of us has an eternal spiritual form in one or the other of the innumerable Vaikuntha lokas. Vaikuntha means without anxiety, the planets without anxiety. We are now in a dream state, slumbering in this misidentification with the temporary material bodies, and the goal, according to the Vaishnava school of Vedanta, is to escape the cycle of reincarnation, samsara, by re-identifying ourselves as eternal servants of the Supreme Soul. And in the Krishna-centric branch of Vaishnavism, the ultimate goal is to surrender unto Krishna. Undivided devotional service will unlock the inherent knowledge built into your soul of the spiritual world. So meditating on God and Goddess Radha liberates you from the material world, returns you to your eternal spiritual form. Now, it also says in the Gaudiya Vaishnava school of Vedanta that there's innumerable Vaikuntha lokas, so not everyone will worship Krishna and Radha. Every form of Lakshmi and Vishnu, so Lakshmi is the female side of God, Vishnu is the male side of God. According to the Gaudiya Vaishnavas, Radharani is the original form of Lakshmi, Krishna is the original form of Vishnu, all of the other Vishnu and Lakshmi forms radiate from them. Other branches of the branch of Hinduism called Vaishnavism will focus on another form of Vishnu, such as Rama. All of the forms of Vishnu are one person, Vishnu, and depending on which branch of Hinduism you belong to or you are studying, which form of Vishnu is the original source, it varies. So, at any rate, we're studying the Gaudiya Vaishnava school of Vedanta. Radharani is the original form of Lakshmi, Krishna is the original form of Vishnu, and with that I'll read from the Brahma Samhita. I worship Govinda. Govinda is another word for Krishna. Go means cow, so all of the words, Goloka is planet cow, so Krishna is the cowherd boy. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, whose transcendental form is full of bliss, truth, substantiality, and is thus full of the most dazzling splendor. Each of the limbs of that transcendental figure possesses in himself the full-fledged functions of all the organs, and eternally sees, maintains, and manifests the infinite universes, both spiritual and mundane. So the spiritual forms on all of the spiritual planets, as I mentioned, are made of knowledge and bliss, eternal knowledge and bliss. And each part of each spiritual form has all of the awareness of every other part. So you can see with your feet and you can smell with your ears. Each part of that absolute spiritual form has all of the qualities of the whole. Continuing with the Brahma Samhita, I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, residing in his own realm, Goloka, with Radha, resembling his own spiritual figure, the embodiment of the ecstatic potency. So I write, Goloka, or cow planet, is the central spiritual planet from which all other Vaikuntha planets radiate. Equivalent to Plato's idea of the good, Goloka is the spiritual sun, the ultimate template of all forms, material and spiritual. The spiritual light radiating from planet cow is Brahman, and all of the other spiritual planets also radiate that fundamental essence of existence, Brahman. And again, just to reiterate this important point of the Vaishnava Vedanta cosmology, a portion of that ocean of spiritual light, the ocean of Brahman, coagulates into the causal ocean, which is like yogurt compared to milk. Mahavishnu lays down in that ocean, exhales the bubble universes, re-inhales them after 310 trillion years, and during that entire interim he's dreaming, so that all of the histories of the various parallel universes in the megaverse are unfolding within the unconscious dream mind of God. Radha Krishna Maya Shiva. So here's a quote from the first book of the Bible, Genesis. And God created man to his own image. To the image of God he created him, male and female he created them. So if God created males and females, that implies that God contains a male and a female aspect. So this is a quote that I introduced with my own words. Then the quoted phrase comes from an anthology called the Hare Krishna movement. So Radha Krishna worship can be considered polymorphic bi-monotheism, or many forms of the dual-gendered divinity. So polymorphic, many forms by monotheism of the dual-gendered divinity. There's one God. It's a form of monotheism. But God, the one God, has many forms. There's many Vishnu forms. Furthermore, the one God has two genders, male and female, and that original male and female manifestation of God, according to the Gaudiya Vaishnava school of Vedanta, is Radharani and Krishna. Then their shadow sides in their unconscious mind are Maya and Shiva. So let me continue reading here. The megaverse of material universes exhaling from Mahavishnu is the dream or subconscious mind of the spiritual planets. As Radha and Krishna, the original forms of Lakshmi and Vishnu, preside over the spiritual planets, Vaikuntha lokas, their shadow sides Maya and Shiva preside over the material universes. That information is also found in the Brahma Samhita. In Jungian terms, Radha's shadow Maya is Krishna's anima, the archetypal image of a woman in a man's unconscious, while Krishna's shadow Shiva is Radha's animus, the archetypal image of a man, in a woman's unconscious, this quaternity, Radha, Krishna, Maya, Shiva, is the God archetype. So, according to Carl Jung, every conscious ego has an unconscious shadow side. We're unconscious of it. We don't know what our own shadow is, and we therefore project it onto everyone we meet. That's an ineradicable tendency, said Carl Jung in a slide that we discussed previously. So if God created man to his own image and each of us has a psychic shadow, that would imply that God also has a psychic shadow, and according to the Gaudiya Vaishnavas, God's shadow is Shiva. Krishna's shadow side is Shiva. It's not that Shiva and Krishna are two different people, they're two aspects of the same person. For Carl Jung, individuation is reuniting all opposites in the understanding that everything originates from the archetypal self, which is the archetype of wholeness through the union of opposites. So individuation requires a union of the conscious and the unconscious mind. So the entire complete understanding of God includes not only Krishna, but also Krishna's feminine energy, Radharani, and then the shadow of each of those two sides of God, which is Shiva and Maya. So the material world is ruled by Maya and Shiva. The actual material world that we experience is called Maya. And it helps me to understand Maya when I read Friedrich Nietzsche's book, The Birth of Tragedy, his first book, wherein he quotes Arthur Schopenhauer, who equates Maya with Kant's a priori categories of thought, space, time, and causality. Responding to empiricists like David Hume, Kant said, yes, we do not experience space or time or causality with any of our five sense organs. You can't see it, smell it, touch it, taste it, or hear it. They are therefore inborn categories of thought, lenses of cognition with which we are born. And all of our sense perceptions of the material world are filtered through these psychological lenses. And that's what creates the illusion of these phenomenal forms that we experience. Maya is space, time, and causality. She creates the illusion that enables you to perceive the material forms in which we are embodied, in which we engage with each other every day. In the spiritual world, the forms are made of the energy from Radharani, according to the Gaudiya Vaishnavas of Vedanta. But I just think it's interesting, this quaternity. Jung says that the archetype of wholeness through the union of opposites manifests itself in the psyche as mandala imagery, and furthermore frequently is divided into four sectors, like the unit circle on the complex number plane, which has the vertical and horizontal crosshairs and a circle going around it like a rifle scope. For some reason, according to Jung, when human beings are in a chaotic state of mind, these images emerge to create order out of the chaos. So the anima and the animus, I won't be discussing them at great length in this class. That's a whole nother class in its own right. But according to Jung, every male has an unconscious image of what a female is in his collective unconscious mind, and that's called an anima. And he projects that anima image onto all of the women that he meets, especially potential mates. And similarly, every woman has this unconscious image of a man, which Jung calls the animus, and she projects that onto the men that she meets. So if Radharani and Krishna are God, and if God has a shadow just like humans do, then who's Krishna's shadow? It would be Shiva, and that would seem to correspond to the animus that women project onto men from their collective unconscious mind. Our Krishna's shadow would be Shiva, Radharani's shadow would be Maya, but because Radha and Krishna are one person, his shadow is her animus, her shadow is his anima. I just think it's a neat cross-wiring that occurs there. You will not read in any Vedic scriptures that I know of that you will read that Krishna and Shiva are related in the way that Shiva is Krishna's shadow and Maya or Durga is Radharani's shadow. But the idea of the anima and the animus is not contained in the Vedic literature. I'm just trying to interpret this in terms of Carl Jung's theory of the collective unconscious mind. Yogamaya and Maha-Maya, Radha and Durga. So here are a couple of quotes from Srila Prabhupada's conversations that he had, and then the final quote is a return to the Brahma Samhita. So according to Srila Prabhupada, Yogamaya means the mercy of the Supreme Lord, which connects a devotee in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. And Maha-Maya means the external potency of the Lord, which puts a conditioned soul into illusion that he will be happy by material adjustment. the next conversation. He said, Yogamaya means that which connects you. Yogamaya, the original Yogamaya, is Krishna's internal potency, that is Radharani. Now from the Brahma Samhita, the external potency Maya, who is of the nature of the shadow of the Chit potency, and that's Radharani, is worshipped by all people as Durga, the creating, preserving, and destroying agency of this mundane world. I adore the primeval Lord Govinda, in accordance with whose will Durga conducts herself. So Yogamaya and Maha-Maya, we've discussed this idea of the material illusion and the spiritual illusion before. Yogamaya is the energy radiating from Radharani, who is the female side of Krishna. So everything in the spiritual world radiates from Krishna through the intermediary of Radharani. She is Krishna's spiritual energy. She is the essence of the spiritual world, just as Maya or Durga is the essence of the material world, as we discussed on the previous slide. Durga, I think, can safely be equated with the a priori category space-time and causality, which would therefore have to have some kind of a spiritual archetype of which they are a shadow. In the spiritual world, there's also space-time and causality, but everything there is made of eternal knowledge and bliss. The world we experience here is a direct dream manifestation of Mahavishnu, who's kind of a satellite through whom all of the spiritual planets radiate their unconscious mind. If you interpret this Vedanta cosmology in the terms of 20th century psychology stemming from Freud and Jung, then we are living out the unconscious mind of God. You can do a dream analysis of God by studying history. The entire point of going over this Vedanta cosmology is to give us an idea of the kind of what Becker calls immortality ideology that would correlate to the psyche equals singularity equation. We're trying to take a leap of faith into some spiritually fantastic realm upon which we can heroically serve God. What kind of immortality ideology would satisfy educated people in the 21st century who've been trained to see the religions of the past as primitive superstitions? Well, when we see the parallels between holographic string theory, which can be merged with Jungian psychology, and the Vedanta cosmology, all of a sudden, these fantastic ideas of many-armed gods and goddesses become a lot more reasonable. And I'm not saying that we have to take a collective leap into any form of Hinduism or any other extant religion today. I'm just providing a model of what has occurred in the past. And when we see how reasonable this religion is in light of the psyche equals singularity equation, it will help us take a leap of faith in some understanding of God. We saw in a previous slide, Nietzsche said, in order for people to believe a religion, they have to believe God gave it and the forefathers lived it. So I'm saying that even if we don't accept any particular religion, even if we adopt Carl Jung's idea that all of the religions emanate from the archetype of God, Carl Jung did believe in a personal God, but he said all of the other forms of religion, Christianity and Judaism and Islam and Hinduism, they're just facets of that God archetype. So even if we take that more abstract understanding of God, still, when we see how our ancestors around the world have worshipped God in a way that is so consistent with this fusion of Jungian psychology and holographic string theory, it should make taking the leap of faith in that worldview a lot easier. Yogamaya and Maha-Maya, forgetting God to love God. So here's a quote from one of Srila Prabhupada's disciples who completed, with a group of disciples, the translations of the Srimad Bhagavatam in the 10th canto, which focuses on Radharani and Krishna and their love affair in the village of Vrindavan. So a little more of a backstory. According to this Gaudiya Vaishnava school of Vedanta, the eternal spiritual planet from which all others radiate is Goloka Vrindavan. That's the spiritual planet. It has an earthly embassy, which is the village of Vrindavan. And that's where Krishna incarnated, according to this cosmology, 5,000 years ago, along with Radharani and along with his brother Balaram and a host of characters. The pastimes in the earthly village of Vrindavan were equally spiritual and eternal, but they were a gift from God to provide reincarnating souls an opportunity to witness the eternal pastimes of God, to meditate upon which liberates the soul and returns the Atman to whichever eternal spiritual form on whichever eternal spiritual planet it fell from. So here's this quote from a purport from Prabhupada's disciples. One of the fundamental philosophical principles of the Srimad Bhagavatam is the distinction between two types of illusion, Yogamaya and Maha-Maya. the spiritual and material states of existence respectively. Although Krishna is God, the omnipotent, omniscient, supreme being, his intimate associates in the spiritual world love him so much that they see him as their beloved child, friend, lover, and so on. So that their ecstatic love can transcend the boundaries of mere reverence, they forget that Krishna is the supreme God of all the universes, and thus their pure, intimate love expands unlimitedly. One may consider their activities to be a manifestation of avidya, ignorance of Lord Krishna's position as God, but the residents of Vrindavan are in fact ignoring the secondary majesty of Krishna and focusing intensely on his infinite beauty, which is the essence of his existence. So we discussed before, Krishna always wears a peacock feather in his hat or in his hair, and he dresses meticulously, and he's the darling of all the cowherd girls. He's the most beautiful boy in the world. And here you see a picture of him dancing with all of the cowherd girls, the gopis. Even though he's in the center with Radharani, he's moving so swiftly that he can move from one gopi to the next and be with each of them simultaneously. Just like that idea that Blaise Pascal had about God being omnipresent yet indivisible as a point traveling everywhere infinitely fast. Well, when Radharani figures out his trick, she gets angry, she stomps off, and he chases her. So the love affair between Radharani and Krishna is the central theme of Vrindavan. And all of the drama around that love affair, to meditate upon that drama, purifies the soul. So we've gone through the Gaudiya Vaishnava school of Vedanta cosmology, and the next two slides are just samples from other Asian schools of philosophy. The first one is Confucianism, so this will be a quote from Confucius's The Doctrine of the Mean, and then we'll have a quote from the Tao Te Ching. And that will complete the look into Asian philosophy, and then we'll start a look into the Western philosophers, beginning with Plato, who we will focus on the most. And the point is to show the parallels between these ancient cosmologies and the re-emerging cosmology centered on the psyche equals singularity equation. And then when we get past Plato, we'll show how the mechanistic cosmology that emerged from Isaac Newton led to a philosophical materialism that was subsequently overthrown and is still being overthrown right now in this class. So let's just begin here with Confucius, knowing that psyche equals singularity is sincerity. So sincerity, according to Confucius, is the ultimate virtue. If you have this virtue of sincerity, which can also be translated as wholeness, but I like the word sincerity because it's just simple advice. Be sincere. What you do, just be sincere. And if you can be that way, then you'll have all kinds of internal power to modulate your own emotions and harmonize everyone else outside of you with yourself and each other and nature. But just notice the way he describes sincerity, how closely it resembles the idea of a gravitational singularity. And so that to know that each of us is one with this infinitely brilliant point of energy, I'm arguing to know that psyche equals singularity is equivalent to Confucius's idea of sincerity. So here's what Confucius has to say. Sincerity is that whereby self-completion is effected, and its way is that by which man must direct himself. Sincerity is the end and beginning of things, the most excellent thing. With this quality he, the sincere man, completes other men and things also. This is the way by which a union is effected of the external and internal. Hence to entire sincerity there belongs ceaselessness. Not ceasing, it continues long. Continuing long, it evidences itself. Evidencing itself, it reaching far, it becomes large and substantial. Large and substantial, it becomes high and brilliant. The heaven now before us is only this bright, shining spot. But when viewed in its inexhaustible extent, the sun, moon, stars, and constellations of the zodiac are suspended in it, and all things are overspread by it. Therefore, the superior man honors his virtuous nature and maintains constant inquiry and study, seeking to carry it out to its breadth and greatness so as to omit none of the more exquisite and minute points which it embraces, and to raise it to its greatest height and brilliancy so as to pursue the course of the mean. Okay, so the gravitational singularity from which all of the universes in the megaverse radiate. That imagery is pretty clearly evident here, as is the idea that Carl Jung has of individuation, becoming a whole and complete person by uniting all the opposites in the understanding that you and everyone else are part of the ultimate archetype of wholeness through the union of opposites, which is the God archetype or the self archetype. So let's quickly read back through here, and then I'll point out the parallels. Sincerity is that whereby self-completion is effected. So there's individuation for Carl Jung. Sincerity is the end and beginning of things. That's the gravitational singularity. The most excellent thing, well, it's a point of infinite power. It completes other men and things also. So that's a combination of Carl Jung's idea of individuation. But according to Confucius, if you become individuated, then you're able to help other people become individuated, which I don't recall Jung saying in any outright way, but his own example showed that, because he studied the nature of individuation, and then he wrote so many books and helped so many people also strive for that goal. It's the way by which a union is effected of the external and internal. That's individuation. So then these next sentences relate more to the gravitational singularity directly. To entire sincerity there belongs ceaselessness. So the gravitational singularity is an infinitely deep well of gravity. It's ceaseless. It's always collapsing into itself, and at the same time it's always expanding. Not ceasing, it continues long. Okay, so it's expanding out, it's reaching far, it becomes large and substantial. Large and substantial, it becomes high and brilliant. So as large and substantial as you can get in this universe is the horizon of the universe itself. High and brilliant, it's infinitely hot, so therefore it's infinitely brilliant. The heaven now before us is only this bright shining spot. So the gravitational singularity occupies each point of the infinitely hot horizon of the cosmos, wherein the past, the present, and the future of the entire universe is condensed. Because of Leibniz's principle of the identity of indiscernibles, each singularity at the horizon of the cosmos is only one. So this can explain how this single bright shining spot, when viewed in its inexhaustible extent, contains the sun, the moon, the stars, and the constellations of the zodiac. The constellations of the zodiac is the horizon of the cosmos. They're all contained in the gravitational singularity. So when the superior man studies this relationship between the self and the gravitational singularity, I'm saying, constantly studies that so as to omit none of the finer points and the minute points, such as the singularity itself, which is the most minute point of all, a point of infinite gravity and zero volume, that will raise your own mind to the greatest height and brilliancy, the cosmic horizon, where all of the archetypes of understanding are superimposed holographically, and enable you to pursue the course of the mean. It helps me to understand the course of the mean, to think about Aristotle's book, The Nicomachean Ethics, where he says virtue is using reason to discern the golden mean of virtue between two extremes of vice, one of excess and one of deficiency. So the virtue of courage is a mean between the excess of rashness and the defect of cowardice. So if you're a soldier with the army, rashness would be leaping ahead at the enemy and leaving your fellow soldiers behind, thereby breaking the discipline of a concerted attack. Cowardice would be running the other direction and abandoning your fellow soldiers. Courage is standing where you're supposed to be and doing what you're supposed to do when you're supposed to do. The point here is that it seems pretty clear to me that the highest virtue of Confucianism is sincerity, which seems pretty clear to me to be a realization of what I'm presenting as the psyche equals singularity equation. Now this is from the Tao Te Ching. It's sometimes spelt with a T, T-A-O, but it's pronounced like a D, by Lao Tzu. So I am saying the Tao equals the singularity. So here are a couple of quotes from the Tao Te Ching. Being great implies reaching out in space. Reaching out in space implies far-reaching. Far-reaching implies reversion to the original point. So this is very similar to what we just read about sincerity from Confucius. Far-reaching out in space implies the cosmic horizon, where everything reverts to the original point, the gravitational singularity of the Big Bang. Recall studying the near-death experiences of the tunnel vision with a point of infinitely welcoming and infinitely bright light at the end. According to special and general relativity, if you could travel at close to the speed of light through space-time, or if you could endure the equivalent gravitational tidal flow by standing just in front of an event horizon of a black hole, you would see all the light of the universe condensed into a single point in your forward field of vision, and it would appear to be at the end of a dark tunnel. All of the light of the universe from the past, the present, and the future condensed in a single point is just another way of saying the gravitational singularity. So again, the Tao is the gravitational singularity. To be one with the Tao is to realize psyche equals singularity. This next quote comes from later in the Tao Te Ching. When the mystic virtue becomes clear, far-reaching, and things revert back to their source, then and then only emerges the grand harmony. So what are you trying to harmonize? The yin and the yang. And that's the famous symbol of Taoism, the yin-yang symbol. So the white side or the light side with the dark circle, and there's the dark side with the white circle. The white represents masculine and light and heat, and the dark represents feminine and darkness, and it's the union of the two, the male and the female principles of the universe, each with the seed of the other in its heart, that creates everything, is the source of everything, the Tao. The yin and the yang reminds me of the combination of Radharani and Krishna, as well as Maya and Shiva, and that quaternity relationship between them. It seems to be broken down into its essential ingredients in Taoism in the yin-yang symbol. But I don't think it's hard to see that reaching out in space until you revert to the original point seems to be fairly clearly a statement of the fundamental nature of the universe, which is that it expands at an accelerating rate until you reach the horizon of the cosmos, where space-time is expanding at the speed of light, and each point of that encompassing sphere is the original point from which space-time emerges at the ongoing Big Bang. And then, when things revert back to that original point, which is like the light at the end of the tunnel, seen by people who recall a near-death experience, then you have this grand harmony. Then you can unite all of the opposites, the male and the female principles of the universe, the conscious and the unconscious. The grand harmony is what Carl Jung calls individuation. It is the hero's journey towards self-realization. And all of these slides are supposed to be like signposts along that road to help us take the leap of faith that there is such a thing as a grand harmony that we can perceive through the mystic virtue. I hope you are enjoying this hero's journey into the realm of philosophy, psychology, and physics. If you want to help me create more content like this, please subscribe and consider sponsoring me here on YouTube. You can also click the link to my website, psycheandsingularity.com, to sign up for a multiple-choice test with over 100 well-crafted questions related to this class, and links to the specific parts of each video where the answers can be found. If you take that test to the end, you will receive a certificate indicating that you have become a Psyche and Singularity scholar. In addition to access to that test, there is also the opportunity to answer essay questions that ask you to relate concepts covered in this class to your own hero's journey. I will personally respond to each of those essays, point out any other parts of this class that I think might bolster your plan. Finally, I want to point out that this course is sponsored by the Platonic Mystery School of the Divine Infinite Being, and you can check those guys out at divineinfinitebeing.com.